these contract officers who would serve for 3 years would demit office when Raff and Rex and Hogan and a whole bunch of Sandhurst people came back after. They used to train for 2 years after. What happened, as I understand, is that when the youngsters came back, Raff and others, the persons who had to assess their performances and assess them generally were these same contract officers who didn't want to go home. They didn't want to go home because the purpose.
A lot of events leading up to that situation. Before that, it had a lot of unrest in the army, a lot of unusual occurrence going on. And it started with when Rafik Shah and Lasalle and Hogan and all these young soldiers came back from England. They were supposed to take over from some of the officers that were seconded, like Luke and Quadad and those men that came in from the civil service and so on. That was the plan, so that those guys would take over. And then they changed it. So Lasalle and Shah, trained officers, have to take orders from soldiers who didn't know nothing about the army. So as far as I'm concerned, there was a lot of officers there who didn't know too much, including the commanding officer. And then the fire Seret, that again caused a lot of unrest in the army. But as a soldier, you have to comply. You can't do too much, you just have to obey orders. But there was a lot of dissatisfied soldiers, very unhappy soldiers. And soldiers was doing all kind of things. Soldiers became frustrated. There was a soldier, they used to call him Bombardier. For some reason, he shot at Sir Major Bullen. He went down by the office and he was unhappy with Bullen for some reason. Well, God saved Sir Major Bullen because the bullet went through a cap, the P cap. And then again, I remember in the army, we were getting problems to get even food. We wasn't getting food, we wasn't getting the clothes clean, all kind of trouble was going on in the army at the time. So that led to a lot of unrest, coupled with the fact that the Black Power movement was going on. And then they declared a state of emergency. So one thing led to the other, and the army was not prepared. My name is Kenneth Hutchinson, 3312. On that morning, April 21st, we were just coming off a Prime Minister guard, and we were at the Governor General guard room. And around 9 o'clock in the morning, I was detailed by my guard commander to take the commanding officer, Stanley Johnson, to police headquarters. Well, of course, I was kind of concerned because I was the driver, the other driver. Why you want me to take him to the police headquarters? But she gave me an order, I had to comply. Going towards the vehicle, my guard commander called me back and he told me, take your weapon. And I took my weapon, put it in the back of the driver's seat, and the commanding officer came in the vehicle and I proceeded to take him to police headquarters. I went down Charlotte Street to make a right on Park Street and a left on St. Vincent Street. On approaching police headquarters, the only word I get from the commanding officer was, turn on Sackville Street. So I turned on Sackville Street and I went through that gate to police headquarters. When I drove into police headquarters, I noticed something very strange. There was no police inside and the place was extremely quiet. I proceeded to the back step and the commanding officer, then Stanley Johnson, came out of the vehicle. Up to that time, he didn't tell me a word and he went upstairs. I told you that it was kind of strange. I couldn't see any police inside there. But when I look around, I look upstairs by CID side, I saw .303 barrel pointing at me. So at that time, I got concerned and I came out of the vehicle, my hands up in the air, and I asked, what is so-and-so going on here? And then a police by the name of Hollinsworth Benjamin, I think he was a corporal at the time, called out my name. He said, Kenneth. So when I look, I say, yeah, Hollinsworth, what's going on here? Then I see a number of police just raise up their head, about 20, 25 police, with all of them pointing guns at me. So Hollinsworth came downstairs and I said, what happened? He said that they got a report that soldiers coming into Port-au-Prince to kill policemen. All my orders was to drop the commanding officer at the police headquarters. So I decided I was going to stay in police headquarters for a time to see what's happening, to know whether I should go back with the vehicle because I was kind of concerned. If they come in to kill police, I was coming from PM Guard. I had my weapon. but I didn't have any wrongs. So I stayed in police headquarters for 5 hours. And then in the evening time, I decided I was going to drive to Camp Ogden. Going to Camp Ogden, I realized Camp Ogden was in disarray. I think they burned down the building. There was a big fire in Camp Ogden. Then we got the order to proceed to the main gate. From there, they had a state of emergency. Captain Spencer at the time came down by the gate and he said that he was in charge at the regiment at the time. Then we get to realize, as the word started to go around, LaSalle and Shah took over.
696 leading Godfrey Cumberbatch. My experience started the day before, which was 20th. After Liberty Men went, the officer of the day called Santo in the petty officer of the day and briefed him. Santo called me now as the leader and then there's some rumbling on the ground about some uprising. What we have to do is to find a place to make as a holding cell because they're going to be bringing down prisoners. So we decided that the classroom, which was upstairs, the chief and petty officer's mess, was a good place to keep them. So we got 2 other men, give them rifle and ammunition, place one upstairs and one downstairs by the door. At about 12:15 that morning, first police car came and he brought Granger and we accompanied him upstairs and put him in a holding cell there. And after every 15 or 20 minutes, 1 or 2 cars come in the compound with prisoners intact. You know, take them and put them upstairs. There were 8 or 10 of them. That was how the morning went. At around 10 o'clock, when the Liberty men came back in, or everybody was back on compound, they started to load the FPPs on them with ammunition. And the sick men, but usually had a sick detail that would go down to TETERON, because that is where the doctor was. So they got in the vehicle and they left for TETERON. A good 15 minutes, when the vehicle came back up in a hurry, and everybody started saying, well, action down TETERON. There was a lot of shooting going on down there. So we had to hustle back up. The crews and everybody, they went on to the Bay and Trinity. And they was getting news what was going on down TETERON. And then we backed out to see. Trinity stayed right in line at the compound. And Colon Bay, we went down TETERON Bay. And when we reached down there, there was a set of soldiers out in the water, swimming out. And I remember one of those guys was Stan French. And I wore French on and I bring him up on the ship. And he said, anybody, praise the Lord, boy, I'm so glad that you was there.
My number is 5 or 6. The numbers in the Coast Guard were different to the Army. They started at 500. 1963, the 9th of September. So I was the 5th officer in the Trinidad Tobago Coast Guard. I had in a certain space because I didn't know what was coming next. So there we are. That brings us to April the 21st morning when the country was put on a state of emergency and the Coast Guard officers were told to be there at 4 o'clock. I reported at 4. I have to tell you, I've never been so scared in all my life. We knew what was going on from what we had been seeing and hearing. And I was saying to myself, not even the whole army and us and the police could stop what was going on. And so I was very, very scared. The first job I had was to go to a classroom with one sailor, and the police had brought all the leaders of the Black Power movement, and they were put in a classroom. And I was told I was in charge of them to keep them there and quiet. And I sat in the classroom with them for about an hour. And as time went on, they became more and more militant and frightening. They started to tell me about the trees that I would be hung on in Woodford Square and what they would do to my family and what people like me deserve. And then one of the more militant got up and he said, little boy, give me the gun. And I have to confess, I was frozen. I had with me a young recruit who had just finished training. And as the man approached to pick up my gun, he took the rifle and the bayonet and stuck it under the man's chin. And he said, if you sneeze, I'll blow your head off. He was so frightened that you could hear the magazine rattling in the rifle. But that incident made everybody sit down and not a word was said.
The morning of 1970, I did a guard in TETERON. I was stationed in Camp Dublin. At that point in time, I was in the volunteers. And they pulled in all the volunteers from the 12th of April, 1973, the Black Power marching into the truck and carrying us up by the president's ground. Then right up there now, they said us take off the shirt. We take off the shirt and they gave us police shirt to wear. Then they move us from the president ground now and carry us Timber. Right in Timber now, Spencer Gate and see we half army, half police. They could take off all the police shirts and burn it because a lot of people thought we were Jamaican soldiers in TETERON that overthrew us. So they wanted us to look different from the soldiers in TETERON. So Spencer said, no. And they could take off the shit and them and burn it. And we put back on the ordinary army shit.
My number is 518, I retired at Homolo. Morning, you called the meeting, and just before the meeting started, the young Franklin, the Seahawk, and of course, and who were to Elm Island. I took a crew, and we just took charge of the island. I had a radio, and I'm hearing a lot of traffic on the radio. And I thought about somewhere after 8, one of the patrol boats was approaching the island, and came up with people on board, and they just discharged them on the island. Prisoners they have. Then the police launches, because when the police had some launches, they were coming from further Spain with people and just jumping them on the island. So I ended up by the end of that day with, I don't know, more than about 20, 25 prisoners. George Weeks was brought to the island. Granger. These were some of the movements and shakers that were all going on, and so I just posted sentries on both sides of the building. And by the following afternoon, some prison officers from Carrera, led by a guy who I got to know very well, Mike Hercules. He was nothing a superintendent at the time. He and warrant officers, George Devine and Leo Abraham, who later became commissioner of prison. And I was amazed how those prison officers knew how to handle these guys. So we withdrew to kind of perimeter security and let them go inside and interact with them and calm them down and give them instructions and get them orderly, because we were armed, being fixed, and ready to take on whatever. Before 1966. I was in Bravo Company, but attached to training wing for shooting purposes. The morning of 1970, I was on the seafront. That's the morning they declared the state of emergency. And I heard a shot fire walk towards the building, which we used to call the offices and the stores. And I saw two persons on the ground, one was like this, lying down and another one. When I looked under the door, they had this kind of half a door with the spring. I saw these two bodies. One was warrant officer, Ramcharan. He was my company sergeant major. He was holding on Rex Lapsal on the ground, like he was raffling. And then he took a rifle that was next to him, and he said, Jones, take the rifle. And I hear him telling Lapsal, sir, cool it, sir, cool it. Every time I took the rifle to these stores and come back, I heard that they were taking them up to put them under closer. When I went back by the office and I looked, I saw Colonel Christopher very emotional, and he was in tears. Then it came out that what really transpired is that they tried to take Colonel Christopher to take command of the company, Lapsal and Shine stores. A little while after, I saw Prince Stewart, a batch he was in the motor platoon, tell me come and see this. So I had a binoculars. He had a binoculars too. And And looking up across the square up to the bathroom there by the bunker, I saw a vehicle parked by the bunker with Lori, Lion, and another guy we used to call Shmoo, Mahmoud. And they had them with their hands up and they had the bunker door open. So I realized something taking place. What had happened before is that Stanley Ryan and Hazel came into the stores and drove 2 weapons and went up by the bunker. A little while after, Lori come down the road, they had the sick parade under the mango tree. And he tell them, get away, and he starts shooting up again, and everybody starts scampering. So it was chaos out there. People started running out by the sea, diving in the water, running down in the direction of the officers went on the edge of the sea, going to Scotland Bay. In the chaos there, I realized they had released Shah and LaSalle from the cell. During that chaos, I heard the Coast Guard boat was out in front. And I went and I have a look from outside the store. I saw it pulling, and then start firing in the direction of the bathroom. It fired a few shots about it, and then it stopped. Then a lieutenant, they call him Gordon, Squidgy Gordon, came with a megaphone, put up on the jetty. He had the megaphone talking to them on the boat. I was continuing what he was saying because it was pointing in the direction of the boat. Then I saw him take off his shoes, take off his shirt. He left the megaphone and go to the ship right by my feet, and he drove off the jetty and swim towards the boat. They shot life prisoners, and he held on to it, and they climbed up on the boat, and they were talking on the boat. I took the binoculars and I looked towards the bridge of the boat, and I saw Richard Kelshaw, Norman Williams was on the boat, blue and white. And I saw somebody in the boat in army uniform, and I knew it wasn't Squidgy Gordon because he never. But on the bridge I saw somebody in uniform, and his face looked like Colonel Johnson, who was the commanding officer. And they released Shah and LaSalle. When LaSalle and them asked for falling, everybody gathered on the roadway, facing the dining hall. And LaSalle came and he spoke. He said, we're going to leave here and go to camp up then. And he wanted everybody to get ready and to prepare to move out to camp up then. He telling everybody who was there. When he finished speaking, he said, who don't want to go could leave. The first person to step out was Rock Salami. Rock Salami come on, and a few men came on, they dressed the remainder. I went into the dining hall, and I hear them talking, and then they shouting, "Fire!"
He then said in a loud, exasperated voice, get out now, Maggie." There was a bone-chilling fear in that command, and without hesitation, we exited the house as fast as we could. As we left the house, slamming shut the door, as we jumped into the green Vauxhall station wagon, and as fast as my brother could drive, we headed out to TETERON, fleeing for our lives, or so we thought. The mutineers were actually one half a bend away from the house. I was in the hatch or trunk of the car, anxiously looking back to see if anyone was behind us. All of a sudden, without any warning, the old green wagon screeched off. There was a big Coast Guard bus blocking the roadway, and unless this wagon loses some weight, there ain't no way we were going to make it through. All of a sudden, I hear my mother say, "Get out. Let's just get out and leave the car here." Everyone starts to get out, and I'm realizing they were going to leave me because there was no handle to unlock the trunk from inside. In an instant, the doors flung open, and everyone starts to exit the car and move forward. I'm now screaming and banging on the back glass at them not to leave me, and I hear my mother yell out, "Jerry! Don't forget Jerry!" As fast as he could, with the move of a football player, my brother spun on a dime and came to the rear of the car to let me out. I think I left the trunk lid in the air and joined the group, hastily making our sprint into Stobles. Fear makes you do things that you don't normally do. We all, from the oldest to the youngest, bolted down that hill screaming at the top of our lungs. I don't know who saw them first, but we shouted, "It's Luke, don't shoot, please don't shoot." With what sounded like a symphony orchestra, it was the first time in my life that I heard so many guns cocked almost in unison. My eyes caught the first sailor in a canal obscured by overgrown grass with what could have been camouflage face markings. Guys were in the trees and strategically placed in killing positions. In retrospect, and if I am not mistaken, as we got to the last slope in Stobles, I thought I heard someone frantically shout, "Hold fire! Hold fire! Hold fire!" I remember seeing one or two guys shift their weapons away from us. I think it was to minimize our fear, but it was too late. Thank God for those men, as they had the discipline to control themselves based on their targets. I am glad the roles were not reversed. The outcome would have been drastically different. My mother, sisters, and Gertrude were crying quite a bit at this point. I was in an internal mess, shocked, shaking, and confused, and looking at my mother and family and wondered what the heck else was going to happen to us now. Battled Commander Jack Williams as we suddenly and frantically appeared behind him. He seemed to have been speaking to other Coast Guard officers, I assume discussing the pending strategy as the mutineers were on their way into Stobles. He tried to console my mother, and I remembered seeing his three-fingered hand on her shoulder, attempting as best as he could to calm her down. He gave my mother a minute to try to compose herself and then said to her, "Did you all run all the way down from the house?" Through a frantic, tearful reply, she was able to tell him, along with my brother, that we had abandoned the car behind the bus as we could not pass. All of a sudden, he shouted to a few guardsmen to go with my brother to move the bus and allow him to get the car out.
They knock on the door and I'm saying, "Well, Bushell not there." Then I'm saying, and McQueen say, "I know Bushell in there." And somebody come with a rifle and cock the rifle and tell me, "Here, open the door, they go shoot me up." I hear the lock up, clack. And Bushell open the door. They go inside, they take rifles. So I asked one of them, I said, "Where are you going with all these rifles?" One of them replied, "Those rifles are for the brothers outside." I said, "Who brothers?" They say, "Like, you don't know what's going on." They load up the rifle up on the truck, they load GPMG up, put the rifles. They wanted to empty the stores and everything, and ammunition, all of that on this little truck, a small open trade truck. Then I walk around to the front, I hear them saying the plane might come back this time with bomb. I say, "See me, I have to leave this place. Who leave him right here, leave him right wherever going on." Well, they form a convoy, and the convoy pack up in my guard room, coming right back. Go to the MI room, they take off all the covers off the truck, all the covers off the Jeep. And they say they waited on the last round to give instructions before they leave. I went up on the last truck. Me, George Simon, who was an athlete, and the back man. He was the company clerk in Bravo Company. He said they're going to camp up and he wants to get out, so we're going out. So we jump over the truck and we sit down in that truck for about an hour. Then Chekos, a couple named Chekos, he pulled up in a Jeep, jumped out from the Jeep, and somebody else was driving. He had men in it, they were fully armed. I remember Mahmoud was sitting timing grenade that they had ducked from the bunker. They had cargo staff, and I hear Chekos saying, he said, "Imagine me, Chekos, on Trinidad and Tobago television announcing, this is the People's Army." After this thing began, I thought they were confined to the army. But then they tell him don't leave. He wanted to go in front as an advance party because they find the convoy was staying too long to leave. He said he jumped into go and take over television also. When he said that, I started to say, "What I had to get out of this place." Then finally, Lafayette pull up in a Jeep and he gets in front of the convoy and he stopped. He stand up, he was on the passenger side of the Jeep and he said, "This is the beginning of a new dawn. Let's go." And they start up all the vehicles and they drive off. I the last truck and the ambulance behind the truck we on. After I was driving that truck. Reach up on the hill, convoy stop. We're in the front was the NATO Coast Guard because we right up on the back, the last truck. And here they say they have a bus in the road and who could drive bus? Somebody said after I was driving the truck I was on, jump off the truck after I going down. Next thing I hear the bus come I was on because that truck was loaded with ammunition. I didn't want to take no chance. I moved a little away in the grass. Next thing shots start firing, more shots firing, and then the hill, big gravel and thing coming. Then I hear somebody go, a man get hooked, and they come up the road, running. One of them had a helmet in the hand. The helmet had a hole in it. And they said, "Chubbuck's baby," like he get hooked. As far as I could think, I believe he was dead already. But they get the ambulance to go, but the shot still firing. Shark came and he used the megaphone, went on the edge overlooking the sea and shouting, "Holy fire!" A man comes with a cargo staff. Shark rightfully tell the man not to fire the boat. He tell him, "Holy fire, they have a wounded man." And they want to pass. The bus that was blocking the road, where Bailey and them was trying to push. And before he got hooked, apparently they take the battery or they pull the wires or the bus couldn't start. So they tried to push it off the road and try to push it from the edge of the cliff so that the jeep could pass with Bailey. And they drive off and go on. All that time men put machine gun on the edge of the thing and load up and ready to shoot at the boat. But the boat stopped firing. And then Sean said they had to go and decide what they had to do. See if they could clear the road up from now that they get a jeep to go through. And they dilly-dally. I say, let me go back in TETERON.
Very frightening. A little later on, a car drives into Stoble's Bay, and then Captain Spencer jumped out of his little sports car and ran. We were in the yard in Stoble's Bay, and he said, they're coming. We have a mutiny in TETERON. He was bleeding from his hand where Rafik Shah tried to shoot him, and he held the SLR with his hand and pushed it up, and the flash guard burned all the inside of his fingers. So his right hand was raw, and he had driven over the hill and arrived in Stoble's Bay. He said they were coming, and Lieutenant Commander Melvin Williams was the captain of the Trinity, and I was his first lieutenant. And he turned to me and he said, "Kelshaw, put your ship at action stations, we're going to see." So I ran back to the ship, we put the ship at action stations, and he came running down the jetty, jumped on board, and we went round to TETERON. While we were in TETERON Bay, he told me to open fire. And I asked him what target, and he said the bunkers are somewhere up in the back there. Fired the bunkers, because we had heard that they were trying to open the bunkers to get ammunition out. So I opened fire with the Bofors 4060 weapon, which looks insignificant, but it's an anti-aircraft weapon and it fires 120 rounds a minute, 40mm round. They were fitted with what is called a Gray's nose fuse because it was anti-aircraft, which meant it would hit the thin skin of an airplane. That would activate the fuse, and when it got inside the plane, shrapnel would fly in the plane and mash it up. So we were firing over TETERON Bay, up to where the bunker was, trying to create a feeling we in charge here now, stop the mutiny. It didn't work. All that happened was there was mass confusion and soldiers started to run everywhere. And then he said, "All right, ceasefire, this is not working." A crop duster. The pilot who was already airborne heard on the radio there was something going on in TETERON. And he flew that crop duster about 20 feet above the hillside going along to see what was going on. And the entire set of troops on the hillside opened fire. And it was only by his skill as a pilot that he came out with the airplane riddled with bullet wounds. So he came. But when we saw that on the ship, we say, "Saul, you're still bad? We're going to show you what's bad." And we let loose with the Beaufort on the hillside. And this time, it was not me. They had Captain Bloom and Melvin Williams, so I wasn't scared. Boy, did we fire that gun. We fired it so much that we had to pick buckets of water from the sea to cool the barrel. It was so hot. And the trees were just flying on the ground. We nicknamed the gun after that and called it the lawnmower. And an officer swam out from TETERON Bay to the ship, and spoke to him. While that was happening, a boatload of sergeants trying to get out of there came out, and the boat capsized right alongside the ship, and a couple of them were drowned. Coast Guard men dived overboard and saved these two sergeants, and we pulled them up on board. We came right back to Stobles Bay, and as a result, I think, of what the officer told Mervyn Williams, he just disappeared. We know now, in hindsight, that he went up the hill to his house where he was living and went down to TETERON. At the time, our Coast Guard aircraft was alerted way early in the morning and was circling on top TETERON Bay watching, and he reported to our headquarters there was a convoy, and that the convoy was forming up and about to leave. This information came to our ops room and was told to Commander Bloom, who sent for the captain of the Trinity. But of course, he was nowhere to be found. And then the order came down to me, "You're the first lieutenant." So I left the ship and I went to Commander Bloom. And I said, "Yes, sir, what would you like?" And I'm going to use his words. He said, "Rich, I want you to take that ship to sea and stop the army convoy." And I was a bit of a rebel myself too. And I said to him, "Why you don't go and take it?" And his reply was still in my mind now. He said, "I could, but you're a Trinidadian, and I'm not. And it's better that you go." I saluted him and I said, "I will, sir." And then when I walked away, he called me back and he said, "Try and don't kill too many people." And I saluted again, went aboard the ship. I had never commanded a ship before in my life. I was the first lieutenant. This is the first time I had ever been in command of a Coast Guard ship. And I went on board, went up on the bridge, we backed off and I went out. And I never thought anything was going to happen. And then to my horror, there came a convoy coming over the hill. And his words were, "Stop it." So I wasn't far out. I was probably less than 100 yards from the shore. And I opened fire. I told the officer in charge of the gun to fire above the convoy and ahead of it so that nobody would be killed. Whether it is known or not, I disobeyed orders because the commander of the army was on the bridge of the ship next to me, Colonel Stanley Johnson. And I realized he had lost it and he was panicking. And I had great respect for a man in his position who was seeing his whole army mutinying and disobeying. And his words were, "Kill them all." When I heard it, I said, "I will not do that, sir." And I told the senior Coast Guard man on the bridge, "Take this man below and put him in the commanding officer's cabin." My job was to stop that convoy, and David Bloom had told me, "Try not to kill me," which is contrary to the orders I got from Stanley. So I fired above and in front of the convoy. Let me tell you something about the both of us. Third one. So every time one wrong went off, it was boom, boom, boom. Very loud. Very low. And the first 3 rounds I fired, you're hearing 3 echoes coming at you. And for an army that had never been under fire, that was the deciding factor. On the hillside, 1 round had hit a tree, and the shrapnel came backwards to the convoy. And a piece of shrapnel passed through young Private Bailey's helmet and came out the next side, and he dropped dead on the road. And for an army that had not been in combat, that had not been under live fire, to see one of their comrades die in front of them, that was it. And the whole convoy stopped dead and reversed up the hill at speed. I felt a great sense of relief and thought, well, this is the end of this. As I was backing off, an ambulance started to come down the hill with a red light flashing and a group of people behind me. Now, all my training had taught me you can't fire at an ambulance. An ambulance is sacred. So I stopped and I fired 2 rounds very high up, but the ambulance didn't stop this time. We had put the Coast Guard bus over the road, and we saw them shaking the bus, and bumping it to move it. And I called Captain Bloom in Stobles Bay on the radio, and I said, "I'm helpless here, I can't fire, there's an ambulance here, and it's coming through." And when Bloom got that message, he says, "Right, stop what you're doing and come alongside quickly." So I took the ship, went back alongside Stobles Bay. He and Mervyn Williams, who had reached back from TETERON, jumped on board, and a whole group of loyal soldiers and everybody who's in Stobles Bay piled up. And then I backed the ship up. Mervyn Williams again was the captain of the ship, except on this occasion, Captain Bloom was on board. So he was in overall command. And we went back off. And he started to fire again, but not at the ambulance, because nobody could shoot at the ambulance. Again, it was just frightening fire on the hillside. And nobody took that on, and the ambulance went through. The rest of the people, hearing the Bofors again, went back to TETERON. We think. Hindsight tells us they were placed along the roadway and the hillside with GPMGs. But the attempt to go out with a full convoy was finished. It was a very significant thing because the ambulance itself had all the spare weapons from TETERON Bay, hand grenades and whatnot inside of it, which is a crime against the Geneva Convention. You can't put weapons into a Red Cross vehicle. And that went into town. And apparently, as we heard, that convoy was going to go up to town and distribute those arms. And had that occurred, Trinidad's history would be totally different. It would have been a battle against police, army, plus there was a whole group of loyal soldiers at the Chaguaramas main gate, and that would have been a battle too. So the whole course of Trinidad's history could have changed if that convoy had gone through. So my initial action on the day now had finished, and we went out with Commander Blue. Meanwhile, the Colin Bay, which is the other ship, took all the prisoners who were the Black Power leaders to Nelson Island. So the Colin Bay was involved in that. And so I had my first command, and I did not, I'm very glad to say, kill everybody on the hillside, because we've thought about it since then. And if that weapon was swept along the face of the convoy with all those soldiers in it, there would have been a bloodbath on the hillside. So only one man died. And as a result, Private Bailey is the hero of 1970. The sight of him on the road bleeding is what made all the soldiers go back. And so the action ended there. It didn't stop there. It went on for 10 days, but the main action had been done. Everybody went back to TETERON, and they remained there for 10 days, and many things happened. The Venezuelans came. We had to go out with the ship. We were so excited. The Venezuelans had a destroyer with a battalion of Marines on it, and they were coming ashore. I took the ship, put it alongside the destroyer, and Captain Bloom went on board and spoke to the captain. And when he came back, the ship turned around and went back in the Gulf. But Derek Williams had the foresight to tell them, we don't want no help. And they went back down in the Gulf. They never left. They stayed just over the horizon in the Gulf there for the whole 10 days. Then another Venezuelan vessel came in, and that created a complete panic in the Coast Guard because we thought that it was going to take Nelson Island and rescue the Black Power leaders. And so the people on Nelson Island went into full emergency. Our ships were placed around the island, but in fact it wasn't so. The boat was coming through the Grand Boca, going down into Guerrilla on standby. So many different excitements came. We remained circling the two ships between Stoble's Bay and Gaspery Island for 10 days, really, until we were so tired we had to send to the hospital to get drugs, speed, and the doctor issued us these drugs to keep us awake. But even with that, after half an hour, we were falling asleep, and we were relieving them more or less on the bridge. The ships were at full emergency in case anybody tried to come home. It was worse at night because you really couldn't see what was going on. And we were there and nobody slept. Everybody watched the hillside in case another attempt to come out was made. On the final day, 10 days later, we were told that Seret was going in to negotiate a surrender. But we were told something else, that if he failed, we, the Coast Guard, were to go into TETERON Bay and flatten it with both ships' guns. And we had a conference, and people were given a chance to back out, say, we don't want to be part of this. But it was so serious that Seret had a tremendous responsibility to get them to hand over the keys to the bunker, which was the signal that they had surrendered. And we had a code word between him and the Coast Guard ships, which were ready to go. And the code word came. They had two code words we were listening for on the radio. Everybody crowded around the radio. One was the washing is dirty, which meant we had to go in there and just blaze away. And the next one was the washing is clean, which means they had surrendered. And after about an hour, this voice came crackling through, the washing is clean. And that to us was the end of the crisis in 1970.
I saw car lights coming up the road from Chakakabana end coming in. So I alerted my men, and the place was pretty dark. We didn't have much lights on at all. And I stopped the vehicle, went up there with my weapon ready. And it was job served. But I didn't know what was going on, that he was allowed or told to come in and thing. When I saw it, was saluted. Say, excuse me, sir, but what's your business here? And well, he started getting on in a haughty way. Don't you know who I am, young man? This and that and the other. I said, well, sir, nobody told me you were coming in, So I called back to Commander Bloom and said, yes, let him go in and so on. But other than that, it was pretty uneventful. However, I want to say something I don't think was ever mentioned by anybody else, which I was aware of, and I'm not sure many people were aware of. The first one is, there was no way that convoy was going to get into Port of Spain. They were not even going to get to Chakacabana, because as you leave Chakacabana and you come around the corner with the hill against one side, sees the other side, there is a large culvert, about 100 feet or so around the bend. And we had packed that with explosives, all the explosives we could lay our hands on, and really rammed it up in there. And a sailor was on watch there with that plunger, and they stayed there right through until the rebels surrendered and they were escorted out. But if they had gotten past the bus, the order was to blow up that road entirely, and would have blown that road to Kingdom Come and the hill and everything. So there was no way we were going to allow the convoy to pass. The second item I want to talk about is that there is no way the famous Carl Gustav anti-tank weapon that they had would have hurt us in any way. We knew that the Carl Gustavs could not have fired at us. Therefore, Commander Bloom, who knew that, he was able to tell the Trinity and the Golden Bay how close they can get to shore. And they were within range of the Carl Gustav, so that they were safe, because we knew it could not fire at us on ships. The other thing I want to mention too, Commander Bloom used to go up to the Prime Minister's residence every day to meet him. And when he come back, he will tell us, well, he used to tell me, because I was one of the more trusted officers, and Colonel Ken Barnes is there. So he was brought in as the chief advisor, along with some other military officers. And they were there with the Prime Minister right through the whole thing. And in fact, at one of the meetings, but they used to bring in Stanley Johnson as well in the early stages, but he didn't have much to offer. And they told him what he should do is issue orders to split up the three mutineers, Charles Allenby. On the Tuesday, one was supposed to go to police headquarters as a liaison, one was supposed to go to Tobago, an assignment, and the third one was supposed to go Nelson Island. So they knew beforehand, they had intelligence that these three were going to do something when the state of emergency was declared.
My number is 0008. I joined the Army before independence in 1962, and I retired in the rank of Major General, the first Major General we ever had. I was not in Trinidad when the mutiny took place in 1970. I was actually in Canada doing a company commander's course. Operator said, hold on, sir, your High Commissioner would like to speak with you. So I held on. She got him on the line, and it was Mr. Matthew RAMCHARAN at that time. He was the Trinidad Tobago High Commissioner to Canada. And he said to me that I should return to Trinidad. And he had made arrangements for me to leave on a BWI flight leaving Canada at 7 o'clock on Sunday morning. And then he gave me a rather strange instruction that I should go to Camp Borden, which is 60 miles south of Toronto, where Lieutenant Brizan was, and bring a support weapons course. And that I should give him an order to return to Trinidad with me, and he had made arrangements for food tickets. And what I need to do is to go to the BWI counter at the airport and find my way back to Trinidad. I returned to Trinidad, and Brizan was taken into custody. He had apparently written a letter. There was a suggestion that he was disappointed that they waited so long after he had left to do what they had planned to do. So that letter was intercepted. He was charged with mutiny without violence. And he was court-martialed and he got 2 years. And regrettably, he's the only person from that incident that served 2 years in prison for it. a Land Rover picked me up and took me straight to St. James Park. That was where Geoff Serrett had set up his headquarters, not in TETERON, and he had taken over. And in fact, I didn't go home. Others were first. And I took the summary, and charges of mutiny with violence and other military offences were laid against. It might have been about 50 or 60 soldiers or more. They were tried in 3 different courts martial. The first one was so-called ringleaders, Charles Salvazi and a couple others, but the other 2 batches with lesser degree involvement in the mutiny itself. Now, what happened was, Brigadier Theodore, who at the time was a major, I was a captain, I was in Canada doing a company commander's course, and he was in England doing senior staff college. And the 2 of us were the only 2 officers outside and were not involved in the mutiny, either as Charles and Baji were charged, and the others were all witnesses. So there was nobody to try them for court-martial, because the law at the time, the Defense Act, said they should be tried by officers of the force. And Brigadier Theodore and myself were the only 2 people on the outside. And I took the summary, so I couldn't, and he alone couldn't sit as the court-martial, because they needed 5 officers to sit on the court-martial. So what the government did, they amended the Defense Act to allow for Commonwealth officers with a similar jurisdiction to ours to sit on the court-martial. And that is how Colonel Danjuma was the first officer on the court-martial. Lieutenant Colonel Achampong from Ghana, Obi Trigama, I think, was from Uganda, and 2 others. One was from Guyana, and the other one was from Sri Lanka, which was Ceylon at the time. Court-martial sat every day for, oh boy, I'm talking about a month or more, which was set up at the town hall in Port of Spain. Before the trial took place, there was a lot of objection from various people as to Colonel Danjuma sitting on the court-martial. And it was brought out where Colonel Danjuma was alleged that he was involved in the mutiny that took place in Nigeria. Quite apart from that, Mills Odoy was the Judge Advocate General. So even the Advocate General in the court-martial was not a local guy. I suppose they wanted to be fair to everybody. Now, I was the military advisor to the prosecution, which was led by Queen's Counsel Bruce Croker. Desmond Allen, Dr. Aeneas Wills, and Pope Wharton. I think he defended badly. So at the end of the prosecution's case, lo and behold, the defense took a clean bar of trial and said that you can't try me, because the commanding officer, who at the time was Brigadier Serrett, had condoned the offense on 3 separate occasions. Now, condemnation is akin to amnesty. It meant that the commanding officer told them that he was not going to charge them. Well, there was a trial within a trial. And on one of the 3 occasions, it is alleged that Brigadier Serrett condoned the offense. Was an occasion in the Royal Jail when he and I went into the jail, the soldiers, I think, and rioted one night. And they had taken off the cell doors, and they sent for Geoff and called me and said, meet him at the Royal Jail. And we went in, and we spoke to the soldiers. Well, he did, actually. And he told them if they were charged with treason, that he would resign. Back up now, I've said that on 3 occasions, it was alleged that he had condoned the offense. On one of those occasions, that's when I was present. What he said is, if they had been charged with treason, they were to be court-martialed. He would resign, and they asked him to put it in writing. So he asked me to pen this note, and I put in it, if they were charged with a mutiny, he would resign. And he said, no, I didn't say that. And he made me rewrite the note, and said if they were charged with treason, that he would resign. And he took the first note I wrote, which said if they were charged with mutiny, he would resign, and he stuck that in his jacket pocket. And well, we left. And it was at the plain bar, they had to put me out of court, and then I had to come back in and give evidence. And when he gave evidence, he produced the old note that I had written. So he must have had some idea that he would need this in some. So on that occasion, at least, they were wrong. Anyhow, the court overruled him, and the trial continued. Sharp made a statement from the dock, so he was not subject to cross-examination by Mr. Brooker. And he made several allegations as to what was happening in the regiment at the time. Again, the court overruled it, and no other evidence was led. The court-martial found them guilty. They appealed, and it went to the appeal court in Trinidad, and they upheld the appeal. They said that Brigadier Serrett did condone the offense, and they should be released. The government appealed that decision. It went all the way to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council upheld the appeal, and the Shah and Asal and Baji and all the others were released. Now, that process took 2 years, and the government at the time released everybody, Shah, Asal, Baji, and everybody. And that was how it ended, I think, about 2 years later.